PA board member Alicia Clark continuing to threaten a strike on the WNBA, even though many players like Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, and more have come out and said they think the deal is fine. Compromise needed to be had on both sides. They are ready to play. We want to play. We still have WNBPA board members and decision makers like Alicia Clark threatening fans online, letting it be known, oh no, we still gonna strike. We still can strike.
A WNBPA board member just declared on Twitter that a work stoppage remains firmly on the table. And this wasn't some superstar who fills arenas or moves merchandise making this statement, but someone with actual decision-making authority, completely contradicting what the marquee players have been saying publicly. Once again, the union has publicly sabotaged its own messaging. Are WNBPA board members threatening a strike truly representing every player's best interests, or are they protecting their own power while undermining the athletes who actually generate ticket sales and viewership? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. We must analyze this tweet carefully, because it provides the clearest window into the current internal turmoil plaguing the WNBPA.
To Twitter to respond to someone, and I believe this young lady, she reports on WNBA as well. Here, the young lady said, watching everything that came out of Unrivaled Media today, it sounds like a strike is essentially off the table for WNBA players in these CBA negotiations. Okay, and here comes Alicia Clark. Hey, this is not accurate. A strike is still very much on the table.
A sports journalist covering the WNBA observed that, based on comments emerging from Unrivaled Media appearances, the prospect of a work stoppage appeared essentially off the table in CBA negotiations. This assessment seemed reasonable, given that several high-profile figures, including important voices from the union's leadership structure, had publicly stated their preference to keep playing, argued that stopping the season would hurt everyone, and recognized the revenue-sharing breakthrough as real progress worth celebrating. Alicia Clark, a WNBA board member, then responded directly, saying the journalist's reading completely missed the point. She stressed that a strike absolutely stays under serious consideration, highlighting the critical distinction between individual players expressing personal hesitation about striking and the actual strike authorization being revoked as a bargaining weapon. From a technical standpoint, her argument holds merit. Since players voted for strike authorization earlier in negotiations, and that authorization has never been formally withdrawn, the board maintains the power to call a work stoppage, regardless of what individual athletes have said in media interviews.
But it's crazy, the people like Alicia Clark who couldn't get nobody to come to games. And I like Alicia Clark. I'm sure she's a nice person. She's had a fine WNBA career. She's a veteran, been around a long time. But it's always the people who can't get 20 people in the gym. It's always the people who ain't selling no jerseys, who ain't moving no numbers, that's threatening this and threatening that and talking about striking and making decisions for the people that's actually the ones bringing the business in, like a Caitlin Clark.
That is the part that this revelation should worry every league player who has gone on camera expressing their wish to compete. Because the authorization they provided months ago, when conditions were different and a confrontational approach seemed more viable, now sits with board members using it as pressure against teammates who seem to have moved past that original stance.
Still have a job in the league for real. Like, what? Alicia Clark's almost 40. Alicia Clark is lucky to even have a job. She's trying to, that's what I'm saying. You got a lot of these old head veterans trying to collect.
The gap between what players are publicly saying and what board members are publicly threatening has become impossible to ignore. This isn't some minor messaging inconsistency or slight delivery difference anymore. It represents a core disagreement about where negotiations currently sit and what approach makes sense going forward. Kelsey Plum described a work stoppage as the worst possible result for all parties and presented the revenue-sharing element as a major win. Paige Becker announced her desire to play basketball and her resistance to striking. Caitlin Clark said months ago at USA Basketball Camp that both sides needed to compromise and the league had to get back to playing, earning her anti-union criticism at the time. Countless athletes throughout the league have repeatedly expressed the same feeling in various ways. They want to compete, they think a deal is reachable, and a strike hurts everyone. Yet Alicia Clark, a board member, tweeted that striking stays under active consideration. These stances cannot both be true as they're being presented. Either players unite behind the board's readiness to call a work stoppage, or they don't. And the public statements from recent weeks clearly show they don't.
No worries. I know how you report, so I was just wanting to add some clarity for you. Players expressing personal opinion on not loving the idea of a strike versus it being taken off the table are very different. I know some of the other interviews I've watched also said we're prepared and have been preparing should one be called. Appreciate you always. So she's letting it be known, hey, we us veterans want to strike. And this is what happens when you've been hoodwinked and conned by your board members. Y'all should have never gave them the authorization to strike. Y'all didn't have to give them that at that time. If y'all wanted to strike, y'all could have still talked.
Contradictory communication has defined this entire negotiation process most reliably. Breonna Stewart, simultaneously an unrivaled co-founder and WNBA vice president, said both offers need more work and maintain the urgency and pressure narrative, suggesting greater distance from a deal. Kelsey Plum, the other vice president, delivered basically the opposite message in tone, noting significant progress, recognizing revenue sharing as substantial and calling a strike the worst-case scenario. Here are two executive committee members apparently examining identical offers, yet producing completely opposite public descriptions of current conditions. This confusion doesn't help the players, it helps the league and Adam Silver, who set the March 10th deadline, specifically hoping to speed up the internal divisions he expected to develop, watching this play out exactly as he planned. When board members publicly contradict vice presidents on social media, the leverage war is already over, because the other side no longer has to guess about internal disputes, they just read the posts. Now think about the specific dynamic making Alicia Clark's tweet particularly damaging for athletes who actually create the league's commercial success. The strike authorization the board holds came through a membership vote, with players approving strike authorization in December, giving the board power to start a work stoppage if and when strategically needed. That vote happened with complete trust in the negotiating committee, as the union's own statement explained, intending to give the board a tool for strategic use if negotiations reached a point where stopping work provided the strongest available pressure. What wasn't fully anticipated in that vote was the situation where membership feelings change while authorization remains, because once the board has strike authorization, they keep it until formal removal, which requires another vote, another coordinated player process, another round of organization that the tight timeline before March 10th makes incredibly difficult to accomplish. As a result, players wanting to compete, the Caitlin Clarks, Paige Beckers, Kelsey Plums, who have publicly pushed for reaching agreement, find themselves in the uncomfortable spot of having given their board a loaded gun months ago and now watching board members pointed at the season while claiming everything stays possible. Authorization was intended as pressure against the league, but has become pressure certain board members use against their own teammates. And the players most affected by this situation are those with the most to lose from a canceled season, not veterans ending careers who will receive final paychecks regardless of CBA results. Not board members whose personal schedules and financial situations might not be dramatically changed by one lost season, but young players in their peak earning years who need the salary boost the new CBA would provide, and whose professional windows are counted in years rather than decades. Caitlin Clark sits at the heart of this more than anyone else, functioning as the commercial driver behind the league's recent growth. With the revenue share payment the WNBA gave to players for the first time ever, the $8 million from the 2025 season existing largely because of what she creates, her presence packing arenas, her absence cutting viewership in half. The entire case for why the new CBA's revenue-sharing structure will produce growing returns depends on forecasts assuming the league's commercial momentum continues rising, and that momentum directly links to her continued participation and success in the league. So having board members threaten a strike pulling her off the court using authorization players provided under different circumstances to defend a hardline stance the wider membership has been publicly backing away from shows a specific organizational breakdown with a clear label, leadership that has stopped representing the people it was elected to serve. Discussion around this situation has correctly spotted one particular trend. Players most outspoken about striking typically aren't the ones packing arenas, and those threatening the most extreme action typically aren't the ones whose absence would be most sharply felt by fans, sponsors, television partners, or the league's revenue forecasts, which isn't accidental but shows real conflict inside the union between players whose power comes from organizational positions and players whose power comes from commercial worth, with board members holding authority through status while stars hold authority through the marketplace. And when these two power sources clash, the market usually wins eventually, though the organizational process can cause enormous harm before that balance is restored. The real irony here is that the CBA deal being discussed represents by historical measures genuinely revolutionary change, with the salary cap leaping from $1.5 million to $5.75 million in year one, a 280% jump, and maximum salaries rising from $249,000 to $1.3 million, which isn't small adjustment territory, while revenue sharing happening for the first time in league history, with an $8 million payment already given out creates a structural shift, transforming what the financial future looks like for every player. These represent actual victories, not everything the union asked for, as the gross versus net revenue share discussion remains unsettled in the way players originally wanted, and the salary cap hasn't reached the $9 million level the union suggested, leaving reasonable room to want more since negotiation exists for a purpose. But using strike authorization to block a revolutionary deal while membership publicly shows their desire to play isn't a bargaining move, it's a power display. And the target audience for that display isn't the league's ownership but the players themselves, specifically those who have been speaking out of turn, from certain board members' viewpoint, by publicly showing their desire for agreement. When Caitlin Clark said we need to play last fall, and faced criticism, those attacks came from people feeling she weakened the union's negotiating strength. And when Paige Becker basically repeated that message weeks later to better reception, the double standard showed the problem was never really the content, but who said it first, and what it revealed about where membership's real preferences actually rest. Now Alicia Clark posts on Twitter, explaining the strike remains definitely in play, supposedly responding to the reporter who wrote differently. But the real targets of this message are the players who have been publicly showing readiness for agreement, with the board reminding them who actually holds the authorization, which is a message worth hearing clearly, because players who gave that authorization can also take it back, and as the March 10th deadline gets closer, pressure builds both on the board to use the tool they've been given, and on the membership to reconsider whether they actually want the board to deploy it. The season approaches, the deal is nearer than mixed messaging indicates, and somewhere in all this, Caitlin Clark waits to play basketball, which ultimately is the only thing she actually asked for. A board member explained on Twitter that striking remains very much under consideration, while the players fans actually pay to see are publicly stating their desire to compete, showing the union's mixed messaging isn't confusion, but a power fight. Smash like if this breakdown connected with you, subscribe to stay current on developments, and share your thoughts below.